Hello everyone and happy Monday. Welcome to chapter 13.3 of Life Science on Nutritional Relationships. And we have a lot to talk about, so we're just going to dive right in. Let's consider one of the most basic and fundamental ideas in nutritional relationships, and that is that some make and some take. Autotrophs, as we can see in this picture, I made this. Autotrophs make their own food, like plants. Plants make their own food. They take the sunlight and convert it into glucose, and that glucose is food that they can use and that we use when we eat plants. Heterotrophs have to eat something else that's alive, and we are heterotrophs. We have to eat something else that's alive. Now, it's a good thing that we're heterotrophs, or else we'd have to go out into the sun every day and raise our hands and bask in the sun in order to do enough photosynthesis to go to sleep at night. And if we had a cloudy day, we wouldn't have too much energy. And one of the most important ideas in ecology is how organisms gather that energy to sustain life. Now, some gather it through eating dead stuff. We're not a saprophyte, fortunately. Saprophytes only eat decaying or dead organic material. And think of a fungus. A fungus is a saprophyte. If something's dying, the fungus is like, ooh, tasty treat, and starts growing and eats it and decays it. But that's good, because if something's decaying, we really don't want this to be a part of the ecosystem all that long. Dying things have some problems. You also have scavengers, like a vulture. A scavenger is a carnivore that likes to feed on dead stuff. So if you see vultures flying around in a circle, odds are that there's either something that's dead or something that they're waiting till it dies. And once it drops to the ground, those vultures are going to tear through it. And it's a good thing, because without scavengers, we would have a lot of dead animals around. And lastly, decomposers. Decomposers are animals that break down dead stuff into soil. And there's a couple different things that will decompose. Certain types of bacterium are decomposers, where they just chew through the dead stuff and they make it into soil, and they allow things then to grow. And that's good, because we need the soil that they produce in order to make our livelihoods happen. Another decomposer is like a worm. A worm eats all this dead stuff, and it actually excretes soil. That's kind of nice for us. And that would be like an earthworm. Now, other things relate to each other in a little bit different way. There's three types of what we call symbiotic relationships. A symbiotic relationship is a relationship where there are two things that are affecting each other. There are ways which symbiotic relationships are good, ways that they don't matter, and ways that it's bad. A way that it's bad is parasitism. One benefits the parasite, the other gets hurt, the host. Consider tapeworm. So if you get a tapeworm in you, I really hope you don't. A lot of tapeworms come to live inside you through undercooked meats, particularly undercooked pork and beef. And what they do is they hook onto your small intestine, and they just eat you. Eat everything you eat. You start to lose weight, you start to feel funny, and you're like, man, what's going on? Well, there's a parasite living in you. This parasite likes its life. You, not so much. Bacteria, another one. So let's say you get strep throat. Strep throat is caused by a bacterium. I believe it's called Streptococcus pyogenes, and that's some bacteriology there. Don't look that up, because that might be wrong. Actually, you can. That's fine. And strep throat is caused by this bacteria, and it lives in you, and it wants to take over, and you don't feel so good. Mistletoe. But I thought mistletoe was a great plant. Actually, it's a parasite. It lives on trees and sucks all the energy out. What does that say when we kiss under the mistletoe? I don't know. But anyway, mutualism is where they work together for their own benefit. Consider crocodiles and birds. This happens here in Florida, where crocodiles will open their mouths and birds will come pick at their teeth. Now, if I was a bird, I'd be a little bit worried. But it turns out that these crocodiles allow the birds to eat what's around their teeth because they actually clean their teeth off and prevent them from getting cavities. And the birds get a snack. So both birds and crocodiles are happy. They work together. That's called mutualism. Commensalism is where one benefits, but the other really doesn't care. There's a lot of different examples of this. For instance, beggar lice and mammals. You know those little hitchhiker things that you get on your clothes sometimes? They don't really affect you. They're kind of annoying, but they don't hurt you. But they get a free ride. So they're benefited, and you don't really care. And because of that, it's called commensalism. Here's another one, a barnacle and a whale. So a barnacle gets attached to a whale for a free ride, and the whale doesn't even know. I mean, it's not slowed down by the barnacle. It's not like the barnacle's stealing its nutrients. The barnacle's just attached to the whale for a free ride, and the whale doesn't care. That's commensalism. Here's another idea. It's called an energy pyramid. It shows how energy is passed on from one trophic level to another. A trophic level is how high you are on the food chain. So, you have all these grasses down here. Let's say you had 100 pieces of grass. Could you have 100 grasshoppers? No, because grasshoppers eat grass, and so you need more grass than you have grasshoppers, right? And then if frogs eat the grasshoppers, you need less frogs than you do grasshoppers, because certainly a frog's going to eat more than one grasshopper. And then if a snake eats a frog, you need less snakes than you do frogs. And so it creates a pyramid-like shape where there's lots and lots of things on the bottom, lots of grasses everywhere, then a pretty good amount of grasshoppers, not so many frogs, and very few snakes, which is a good thing. I don't like snakes. So, anyway, it creates an energy pyramid, and it does look like a pyramid in shape. Next thing is a food web. A food web shows food chains, and a food chain just shows what eats what. So consider the following diagram. Here is a classic food web. You have the hyena, which eats the zebra which eats the leaves on the tree, the cheetah, which also eats the zebra. It looks like the zebra is getting eaten a lot, but really the tree doesn't eat anything. So, in a sense, it shows just how each of these things relate to one another. And at the end, the decomposers, they eat everything that dies. And so a food web just shows how they're connected. This eats this, and then this eats this, and then this, well, it doesn't get eaten by anything, but it eats just about everything. That's a food web. And I'm going to have you do a little bit of a project over a food web. But we'll get more on that sometime later. Now, this is where you have to turn your brain on. Okay? Let's take a look at this graph. What can we see? So here in blue, there's the grass. Here in red is a sheep. And here in green is a wolf. Things relate one to the other organism. Now you can see here that, wow, there's a lot more grass than there once was. And now after 8 years or so, there's even more grass. Well, what happens when there's more grass to eat? Well, sheep which eat grass are like, hey, I get to have more sheep now too. And then all of a sudden, what happens in year 12? There's a lot more sheep than there used to be. Well, what happens to the grass? There's a lot less grass than there used to be. Well, how do the sheep affect the grass? Well, because the sheep eat the grass and there's more sheep, here it is, and there's more sheep, now there's less grass. And look at what happens when there's a lot more sheep. What happens? There's a lot more wolves. Why? Because the wolves eat the sheep. And at some point, the wolves eat almost all the sheep, and then the wolf population starts going down. Well, why would the wolf population start going down? Because there's not a lot of sheep to eat. So you can see how these things affect each other continually. Now, in an ecosystem that's balanced, it's not going to be like this. It's going to be like this. It's going to stay where there's a lot of grass and there's a little bit of sheep and not a lot of wolves. In this ecosystem, while there's a lot of change, we go from having, tiny bit of grass to a ton of grass, back to not a lot of grass, back to a ton of grass. And here with the sheep, we have, wow, there's a ton of sheep. There's sheep everywhere. And in just 8 years, almost all the sheep are dead because there's so many wolves that ate the sheep. When you have more wolves than sheep, you have a big problem. And so anyway, that's what we can learn just about a simple graph and how these things relate one to the next. And hopefully you learned a lot through this lesson. Again, like usual, you have some homework. That is Section Review 13.3, page 486. That's numbers 1 through 5, and Thought Provoker number 2. So you don't have to do Thought Provoker number 1. Thought Provoker number 2, I think, is a pretty good question. Well, anyways, that's all I have for you. Tune in next time to hear the very last of our lessons over 13.4, Man's Responsibility in the Ecosystem. I'm looking forward to teaching that. I will see you guys later. Bye-bye.